Welcome to Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here is the podcast host, James Delingpole.
Welcome to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole. And I know I always say I'm excited about my very special guest, but you've been asking for this guy for a long, long time. His name is Geoff Norcott, and he is a very rare thing, a conservative stand-up.
Yeah, I think legally I'm allowed to say one of few, because I'm not the only one.
No.
You know, there are a couple
I can name Andrew Lawrence.
I think there's Andrew and Lee Hurst, who I don't think would associate with strict party political colours. So Andrew's probably right of centre. Lee wouldn't even describe himself as right of centre, probably.
Right.
As Leo Kerr, Scottish. I probably shouldn't be naming, the competition here, but I've got in trouble before for seeming to make out that it was just me. So there are others out there. I suppose the thing that I've done is been honest about my party allegiances and also voted Leave as well. And I don't know if there's any that do both.
Yeah, but isn't that one of the most tedious things in the entirety of comedy? Bitter Ramona comics banging on and assuming that they're already... I mean, hang on a second. If the majority of the country, particularly in the provinces, of course, where obviously you've got to tour if you're a comedian, you can't play London every night, you're probably with an audience...
Some of them give it a good go playing London every night. And it's a different kind of comic. Certainly younger comics will look to do a 5 to 10, 20 night run at the Soho Theatre, whereas my thing has always been... when I was a club comic, I say when, I still am a club comic, it was getting out and around the country. That's more exciting to... I don't know, it just sort of feels like going behind all sorts of different kinds of enemy lines. So, and yeah, I think it was weird for the country, particularly with Brexit, because I think they sort of accepted, with... political comedy, all right, they're all Labour, and that for some reason that was just an accepted norm. I think Brexit was this new thing. So when it seemed like 100% of comics were Remain, I think it seemed bogus more than anything else. I think they just thought it was some sort of stitch up, and because Brexit sort of like set certain wings of politics against each other. Everyone was then suddenly it was, to use their words, it was non-binary, and yet Brexit wasn't even binary. It was just this one line, which was.
But Brexit, do you not think, was a great breakout moment? I mean, look, in the bad old days, the country was divided between Labour and Conservative, left and right. But Brexit opened up a completely different fault line.
Yeah.
Which comics could have taken advantage of.
It's like Avengers Infinity War, isn't it? Everybody's fighting each other.
It is like
it's just kicking off left, right and centre.
Exactly.
And I've had Tories call me a traitor, and Lexit type voters will have had, the progressive centre of Labour call them names and stuff. It's just like this massive punch up. And I probably shouldn't be as excited by it as I am, but I think it's going to have a positive effect on politics going forward. I think it already has, actually, because I don't think that, even though some people are still trying to do this, I don't think you can take anyone's vote for granted anymore.
No. I saw you in Nottingham because I wanted to do my homework before we spoke. You were great, by the way, and I'm not just saying that because you're sitting next to me. You really were
Good crowd that night, yeah.
You told us we were a good crowd. I thought you were just lying to us.
No, it was good. It was good. I mean, there was obviously that moment where the guy got upset. I don't know if you remember that.
The Dutch guy.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think what happened was he was enjoying the show, and so I'd sort of lured him in. And then I don't think he realised that I voted Leave. So when I said that, and this sometimes happens if someone's decided that they like you and then find out that you're a Leaver, it's a very jarring moment for them. So he had a little emotional outburst. In fairness to him, he sort of got himself together quite quickly. But he sort of basically, what was he saying? He was saying, you voted to make me leave. And he took it all very personally. But it's not the first time it's happened.
Actually, there must be some sort of weird relationship that goes on between comics and their audiences. I mean, is it really about this? Do they kind of have this deep emotional response to you? And if they feel that you're friend, I mean, is that how it works?
It's a social interaction on some levels, isn't it? Because it's like you arrive at a party, but where this weird thing where everyone's got to listen to you for a while, and then over time they sort of decide if they like you, they're buying into you. Over the course of an hour, they know quite a lot of stuff about you as well. And and then if they find out something that runs contrary to what they thought they knew about you or they hoped about you, And, you know, Brexit, I remember when I was doing the show straight after the Brexit vote in Edinburgh 2016, I mentioned I voted Leave towards the end. And every night, it was hard. It was really hard. I don't think I had particularly good material on it at the time, to be honest. But I just was like, I was keen to get it out there.
You mean the audience gave you a hard time?
Yeah, not always like overtly a hard time, but just the feel in the room. Because, you know, if there were a lot of Tories come to see me during that run, but as you'd imagine at the Edinburgh Festival, they were probably at the more progressive.
They were London Tories.
Yeah. Not all of them, but most, I would say. So I kind of like lost the whole room every night. Yeah.
How can you tell you've lost a room?
Straight after doing stuff that was sort of not anti-NHS, but so I sort of made it was a weird decision really. I made the back end of the show the two hardest bits to do. So I was sort of questioning some of the orthodoxies around the NHS. So I sort of said, all right, let's lighten it up a bit. Brexit. And that got a laugh generally.
Yeah, until
I started. You know, I don't think I had my viewpoint fully together at that point. I think hopefully for the show that you saw, I do, certainly for comedy's sake, I do, which is more that, you know, there's been a lot of personality characteristics or fun poked at Leave voters. And it's just to point out, you know what, Remain voters, you know, there's a certain kind of Remainer that talks a hell of a lot of shit as well. You know, it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah. But how much mileage can there be in mischaracterising Brexiteers, Leavers, as kind of racist Neanderthals, Little Englanders? I mean,
yeah, it's a really weird strategy, isn't it? Like, but it's good in a way. Like you get to know what people think. So, you know, say they hadn't done that and had kept their counsel, then at this point the chances of overturning the Brexit vote would be probably higher. But there's this legacy of mistrust that kind of like, you know, it just the mask slipped a little bit, didn't it? From certainly the liberal left. That I suppose had always spoken about the working class in a certain way. And I'm always cautious about making completely blanket comments because I know that not everybody on the liberal left...
sorry, go on.
I know that not everybody on the liberal left feels like this. But certainly, you know, that first 2 weeks, you almost got to see what people's real reactions were. And it was like, oh, right, so the working class are this sort of like this convenient tool to sort of just keep things going as they were. You know, this power base that you can draw on. And then, you know, I mean, they still haven't learned. I went for an interview yesterday with Our Future, Our Choice, a young lad, nice lad, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But this idea that young people's democratic vote over Brexit should have some sort of positive handicap on it or like some sort of tariff where it means more than if you're over 55 and, you know, this crazy idea that and one of the weird things about that is I sort of think if you're 55 now with medical science as it is, you might well live to you're 100. So you've got quite a lot of, probably half your life left. So this idea that only young people should have a say. But, you know, I was talking to them about that launch. Do you remember that recent one with Jean-Luc Picard? They had a meeting of like 1,000 businessmen.
That's right. Yeah.
And I said to him, why did you do it in London? Like, even from a simple PR point of view, you did it in North London, right? And you had, the figurehead of it was a lovey.
You asked Captain Picard this?
Yeah. No, sorry. The guy from Our Future, Our Choice.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
And to be fair to him, he was like, and he's young, you know, he's not like the full decision maker.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, that's a fair point. But I just thought it's mad. Like, even if you were doing cynical PR, you're doing fucking Middlesbrough. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or you get, and even if it's going to be North London, East London, or South London, you know, if it's going to be anywhere in London, not fucking Islington, you know what I mean?
But you know, they still believe this shit. I met these kids the other day. I mean, two of them were like in their early 20s and one was in his early 30s, and he was just he lived in London, he worked in the film industry, so he was hanging about with kind of fellow kind of liberal bien pensant types. But he was just starting to get to the stage in his life where you question the narrative a bit. But when I got them onto Brexit, they were all came up with the same line about, the working classes were just, they shouldn't have been given the vote because they weren't given the right information and they just didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they actually believe this patronising shit.
It's the first time they've had that thought, given the amount of elections we've had since 2010. It's weird that it's the first time that natural sort of limitation of all democracy becomes a problem. It's always a problem, isn't it? How much can you know? How much do you know? But the beauty of it is that all the votes are worth the same. And I was, you know, and I know that like there's been this big legacy. I was thinking about like expertise and stuff, and I increasingly think that human reactions to politics are just as valid, right? Like hunches and just a suspicion about people or a feeling in a way. And
I was going to ask you a patronising question. I mean, presumably you are actual working class.
Well, yeah, I mean, we sit in. I mean, we're sitting here in Cambridgeshire,
Yeah.
but I'm. I think I'm what was once called Mondeo man. I think I'm that guy.
So you're sort of lower middle class, probably.
Yeah, well, that's where I've got to. I think.
Right.
But I'm still trying.
What did your parents do? Because that's quite a good class indicator.
So the parents were. So it started off. My dad was a draftsman for BT. So when I was young, up until about the age of 9, we lived in a home that we owned and stuff. So it was all going all right then. But then my parents got divorced, and then my dad was made redundant. And this is kind of like the sitcom moment, almost really, where the status drop happened. And my mum, a massive contrarian herself. You remember, like in the late 80s, the prevailing thing was divorce was happening a lot. It was screw him as hard as you can. She left him with a house, and we moved into a council estate. So it was like a very formative time, like 8, 9 years old, to suddenly go from that life, living on a reasonable street in Wimbledon, to be in a council estate on the border of Wandsworth, and we lived in council accommodation up until then we moved to Mitcham. And yeah, so that's when I kind of entered that world.
Did you have to toughen up at all?
Yeah, I got like bullied quite a lot when we first moved around the estate. They used to call me Long Word Alert because my mum was quite insistent. She was an orphan herself, so she came from very humble stock. But that I would get. Yeah, I used to use long words. I mean, I remember one particular moment was my mum was having a hysterectomy, and one of the lads sort of said, "Where's your mum?" because he hadn't seen her for a few days. And I said, "Oh, she's having a hysterectomy." And he thought it was some Latin word, and he punched me in the arm. He went, "Stop using your fucking long words." I was really stuck because I thought, if I have to explain what it is, I think the word actually saves us some quite gruesome sort of exposition, really.
Yeah. So that must have sort of shaped you as a.
Yeah.
Did it like hone your sense of humour?
I suppose, yeah. Well, because that was the thing that I noticed got me by in a way, and diplomacy as well. Because my mum was because my mum and dad were both political. So my dad was a Labour man and a trade unionist, and my mum was ran to be a Lib Dem councillor. It's kind of odd because you think, given her background, her natural thing would be the Labour Party, but she tended towards the centre. And but she was brilliant at diffusing arguments brilliant at having arguments, causing them, starting them, and diffusing them.
Yeah.
And so when I was living on that estate, I kind of quickly worked out that it was a way of ingratiating myself.
But so you must have. This has certainly been my experience. The people I meet, the sort of ordinary people, who voted Brexit, they're not thick. They're not necessarily educated, but I'm not sure that education is necessarily. I mean, when we're talking about further education, it seems to me it just fills your head with kind of gender studies bollocks and things like that.
Well, yeah, I think that was one of the worst legacies from the vote. Was this? I mean, it's a bugbear, and it's one of these big motifs from the Brexit thing. It was about the bus, right, and the figure on the bus. And I think I'm banging this drum a lot. It was at first it was a coach. And that's kind of offensive. People keep saying bus. We clearly never been on a fucking bus because that looks nothing like a bus. And the other thing was, I think historically it's gone down weirdly. So the idea, I think, in some Remainers' minds is that the bus just appeared, it was seen, the number was absorbed, and then we all walked straight into a polling booth and voted leave. Whereas it's actually way more complex than that. I mean, I think it appeared 6 to 8 weeks before the end of campaigning, so it was then subject to quite mass scrutiny. And on shows like Good Morning Britain, shows that mass audiences were likely to see. And I think that by the end of it, most people were like, yeah, that figure probably is a bit exaggerated, but it was still, when they said, oh, it's actually only half that. So the public are going, oh, only half that. Is that all it is it?
Yeah, you've actually got that. But you presumably haven't read the Tim Shipman book about this.
I haven't read it.
No. So because you're making a point that actually was part of their strategy. The Leave campaign said, look, we're going to put out this figure, and okay, it may be wrong. It may be a sort of extreme version of what's going on, but it doesn't matter because what it will do is get the other side to grumble about this, and it'll be on every programme, and they'll suddenly go, well, even if it's not 350.
Yeah, it's evil genius, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's clever, but it was all it sort of shone a light on the complacency as well, that they thought they could just say, well, that's a lie. It's actually only half this amount, and I think that I think there's some sensible Remainers out there that have probably way too late realised that they need to placate. But you look any given day on Twitter and stuff, there's people that just want to feel intellectual by just kicking and spitting at the people that voted like that. And I think you know, intellect is way more complex than where you put your cross in a box every few years. You know, I think something that's increasingly bugging the shit out of me is that people then think, well, that means I'm a good person. So if I'm a Remainer, that means I'm bohemian. If I'm a Labour voter, that means I'm compassionate. And I think that, you know, and equally, you know, being a Conservative voter doesn't mean you're economically literate. It's way more complex than that. But that seems to be where we're at now. Is all these fucking badges that we wear.
I've been on this journey in the last 10 years where I've completely turned against the whole bloody Oxbridge thing. You know, I used to think, hey, it's bloody great. I mean, I'm really clever. I went to Oxford. And obviously I still do think I'm bloody clever. Yeah. But I look at
it's good that you got in there.
Yeah, but I look at all the other tossers who went, I mean, some of whom are my friends. And what good's it done them? I mean, okay, it's got them into the system, but it hasn't taught them to think clearly, or it hasn't taught them to think honestly.
Thinking honestly, yeah. I mean, that's and it's like, I think that's one of the things with being working class is like, is that quality of thought. Do you know what I mean? Like, you see it, that kind of the difference, like the wit and wisdom. I think is always something that struck out for me. If you're ever in a, you know, you're a pub or you're on a stag do with lads like that, and the kind of humour that flows around, it's just
banter.
But it's just as in. I always thought this about comedy as well, to a point. Like, there's a few mainstream type guys. They're called mainstream now, but obviously the mainstream is the kind of stuff that we do. But and I always looked at their acts and I thought there was stuff that they did in their acts that if they'd have added a few long words into it, the reviewers would have been circle jerking over what had happened. You know, like these odd touches that were. There's a brilliant comic called Geoff Stevenson that did this routine, and he would deliberately get waylaid in the routine. And then he starts saying, he goes, I'm supposed to be ahead of this point by now. He goes, I've got characters from other jokes, and he would like mime them looking at their watches. And I thought it was brilliant. And he built up this picture of a backlog of jokes, and I thought it's fantastic. And I thought, wow, you know, if the likes of Daniel Kitson had done something like that, they'd be going, oh, how unbelievably postmodern. But you know, you don't always need to put the words on it, you know. And I think that I like long words. My mum encouraged me to learn quite a few of them, but I just think if you can just get it out there, and that's one of the great things about good joke writing is the leaner it is, and the bigger the audience that you can draw in with it, the better.
Do you think it's because working class people are closer to being animals, so they live so they're like more feral, and so their senses are attuned more to the kind of dog world of.
I suppose I've always thought, like, spider senses are a thing, you know. Sometimes I have this with my wife when we walk into a situation and I'll just go, something's dodgy, you know what I mean, like, or something's going to kick off. Or I remember, and the biggest example of that, I'm just patting myself on the back here, but I am sort of, you know, when you're with a woman and you work out something ahead of it, you know, it's good credit in the bank.
Yeah.
And we were walking down Brick Lane and I was like, I think something's going to kick off, right? Because there was a guy and there was just a sense of it, and this fight spilled out into the street. So I'd moved over to the other side of the street, but there was just, I don't know, there was a sort of like a stillness in the air. There was something weird.
You are a man. You're a proper bloody man.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that the only times
I'd have been walking straight into, you know, let's go into this fight.
No, I didn't. I mean, in a way, there was a sort of cowardice in there. I wanted to avoid the fight as much as possible. But you know, it's interesting that the army as well, they teach that, because I did
spider sense.
Yeah, to trust it, because I did 5 tours out to Afghanistan to do shows there while that conflict was on.
Did you now?
Yeah, and
so you went to Camp Bastion?
Camp Bastion, Kandahar, Kabul. They're all Kurds for some reason there.
And how
big alliterative war, that one.
How How threatened did you feel at any given time?
No less than a night out in Reading, I think. Like, I mean, but that was the general level of threat. Was they would say that, you know, the population of, or the size of this place is like, that was always fucking Reading for some reason. The difference is that you know specifically where the threat's coming from. Yeah. So you look at a mountain, certainly in Kandahar, you go, right, there's people up there that are trying to launch rockets here and blow you up, you know. Yeah. Whereas you get this tube in Stockwell, it's abstract, isn't it? It's sort of, you know, it could come from anything. But there were rocket attacks when we was in Kandahar. There was 4 within a very short space of time. So it was weird because, like, I'd been out a few times and nothing had ever happened. Yeah. And then so we had 1 rocket attack, and I was kind of like, well, okay, fine. There was always going to be 1, and then there was another one. And then there was a brief pause, then there were another 2. And that was when you start to get really scared, because you thought, well, what if they've just not observed properly and this it's under a concerted attack, you know.
So what was your experience of the rocket attacks? Were you hearing a kind of crump nearby, or
so what happened?
what?
We was on stage. We were just starting the show, and the alarm, the alert went off and stuff. So you have to just lie on the floor with your hands in a certain position. You have to lie on the floor with your hands in a certain position, and then it happened again at the start of the show.
Sorry, just go back. Lie on the floor with your hands in a certain position?
Yeah, so just like to cover it, like as the noise of the blast, so you kind of arch your hands across your ears. I mean, I'm sure it probably doesn't matter fuck all if you're anywhere near it, sort of thing. But although there's a way that blasts kind of go up and over you, there's a sort of way that impacts move.
So you make a sort of a triangle, pyramid sort of thing with your hand, so that the blast doesn't go into your ear.
Yeah. If there's any chance that it could save your hearing, basically. And what was interesting was that at that point there was a female dancer on stage. Now I don't know, you know, in the sort of political environment, at post-Weinstein age, whether or not this would still happen, but they used to get troops of girl dancers to go out, and it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't erotic dancing, but it's kind of sexy dancing. It was girls. Yeah, it was great. You know, I mean, that's one of the things I think is really odd is and now it seems like a radical or a controversial thing to say that watching really attractive girls dance was fucking brilliant. And so, you know, the crowds were like 90% men. I think towards the back end of it, there were enough complaints that there were no male dancers. So, and that was a hard thing to negotiate, because what happened was when they did put male dancers in, even the women were going, yeah, that's a bit fucking weird. But what they found was that if they got a guy to do kind of like b-boy, breakdancing, that kind of thing, it actually had a home, so it all worked, you know, so it just took a bit of thought. But then it was only girls, and the alert went up, and there was a girl on stage who was doing a routine on a chair. So I just said it wasn't erotic, but I've just mentioned a chair. So she was sort of bent over it, and then the alert went up. So she had to kind of like lie on the chair. And then so we were just very still for a long period of time. And then after a while, you kind of get the sense that, you know, it's going to clear. And then everyone started to look up, and there was a light. She was wearing these sequin hot pants, and there was light shining onto her arse, basically. But because of the power of the light, it was then shining up into the sky. And I thought, it's a really weird moment, right? Or maybe I thought it's on reflection, but
it sounds like a dream you're describing.
No, it's absolutely happened, and I thought, isn't that weird? Because like it just shows how feminism could be viewed, right? Because, you know, I know a lot of people, certainly colleagues of mine, who in that situation would have felt that she was being objectified and stuff. Save for the fact that I know the girl in question would have been quite happily objectified. Yeah, she enjoyed that line of work. But from the Taliban's point of view, right? They're going, fuck, man. It's almost like a mission statement, isn't it? Like, you know, like look what you think women should be doing, and we're literally sort of shining something into light, like a sort of bat signal across the mountains of Kandahar off a woman's arse. And and it was interesting as well. Like there was another show that we did at Lashkar, which I always think sounds very Star Warsy and very cool.
It does,
and it sort of is as well. And the musician was on stage tuning up, and this was shortly after the prayer burning, the Quran burning had happened. So it was a very sensitive time, and you had to really think about stuff like that. And while he was tuning up, the call to prayer started outside of the camp, and then he said, he basically sort of went, oh, shut the fuck up, sort of thing. And we'd been briefed about this, do you know what I mean? This was not a good move, and we're thinking, and Lashkar was in the middle of the city, you know, like, and we'd seen the videos of people at the kind of camp walls and stuff. So I'm like, did he just fucking do that, you know? And then what happened was the interpreters that they had on the base started surrounding me, because they thought that because I was comparing it, that I was the kind of booked in, was therefore responsible, and then so we had this dialogue while he was still playing music about how best to sort of
diffuse the situation.
And then we were like, okay, we'll do this. We'll make an apology. And then I said, yeah, I tell you what, like, you know, we won't send the girls back out next time. And all the interpreters went, now steady on, mate. Yeah. And I was like, oh right, I see, I get it. Yeah. You know, blokes are just blokes, right? And it was an uneasy night's sleep that night, because we had outside our camp, there was outside our tent there was a little thing that said CSE events team. I was like, could we just take that off tonight, because we're the guys that just insulted the call to prayer, for fuck's sake.
You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Geoff Norcott.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Why did we see some of the Republican
kissing of Mark Zuckerberg that was taking place.
I called it kissing the ring because I felt like every single person practically had to kiss the ring of this guy, who wants to do nothing except get all those people out of office. So, bizarre behavior from the Republicans.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Geoff Norcott. Geoff, do you feel that having actually been mortared, you can now claim man points?
Yeah. It's funny actually. If there was this civilian medal that was on offer for civilians that had spent more than 60 days in theatre or something, which is quite, it's a fair bit of time.
How many have you spent?
Well, I got the medal, yeah, because I'd done enough.
Did you?
Yeah, I know, it's a really cool thing. It's also, there's a part of you that thinks, fucking, I was just literally telling knob gags, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not sure how much, my routines did to beat back.
You did knob gags for England, for Britain.
Yeah, like, the family, it was a big deal for the family. Like, my family are, like a lot of families where stuff like that matters, and certainly with my in-laws, it was they're very into their World War history and stuff. So.
I think you did a good thing. Although, when you read about what people like Vera Lynn, when she went out to the Far East, there was serious danger that she was going to get overrun, and she'd probably been bayoneted by the Japanese. That was proper.
I shouldn't laugh at that.
Not,
I don't know
not
why.
that I'm diminishing.
There's something
any
about
way
bayoneting that's sort of funny, isn't it? It's just a word. Not if it happens, but just getting bayoneted, because it's something very. It's like being shot by a musket, isn't it?
You see, there's your kind of sort of pervy comic mind.
Yes.
Looking for
it's nouns, really.
angle.
Yeah, it's nouns as much as anything.
Is it? Yeah. Bayonet, yeah.
But yeah, she faced real risk, and to be honest, I'd love to say that we were under fire and all that. There was, but mostly I felt very safe. Like the points of contact. And
how do you find the squaddies respond better than London crowds or
yes
crowds?
And no. The thing was, the gigs were dry by that point. They used to have beer on site and stuff, but obviously, there's always someone that breaks the rules or does something. So. Then there's
always one.
Then there's the overcorrection whereby they think, well, we had so many occasions where nothing happened, and on the one occasion where something happened, let's ruin a good thing. So by the time I was going out there, they were dry gigs, so there's a sort of sobriety that goes with that. There's a context thing that however much they're enjoying it, you're still sitting in there, in the middle of a war zone and stuff like that. And you were sometimes doing gigs at weird times. So when I did the forward bases, so the main base tour was, you never really felt under that much risk there. And then the forward bases were, slightly, you could hear stuff going on, sort of 3 kilometres away. And you would just get helicoptered in and you would just set up the gig. And sometimes you'd do it at 9 a.m. So often happening at weird times. Right.
And I suppose these soldiers have probably been out on patrol, risking their lives, seeing their mates blown up.
Yeah. But one of them, we finished the gig. They all said thanks, strapped on their gear, walked out of the camp gate, and so we think, wow, they actually laughed while their next job was to go out there on foot patrol. And it's going to sound a bit worthy and stuff, but it really was an eye-opener in terms of how the British Army do business. And I think that it's going to sound like sort of flag-waving, sort of jingoism or patriotism, but I met a lot of different, I met American forces out there, Danish, a lot of people don't seem to realise how many different armed forces were involved in that conflict. And the British, they go about their business with a real sense of decency and purpose. And I suppose in a way, it was one of the first times that made me question kind of like the liberal consensus, because I was back here in the stand-up world, and obviously there's a view of all conflict that tends to pervade sort of liberal arts movements. And, there was things being said about British soldiers and, people trying to get attention by calling them baby killers or this, that and the other. And then you go out there and you sort of encountered the sense of mission and what they felt they were out there to achieve and the kind of people. And I thought, this is bullshit, the way that people are representing this. And I also thought, it's sort of interesting as well that like a big part of the situation on the ground there was, that women were subjugated, right? And I thought, very strange, like that feminism never... Like, say, for example, if you had a group of people, say you said there's a country where Jews aren't allowed to drive, aren't allowed to show their faces, and then it's something about gender, isn't it? There's something about the proximity of the relationship between men and women where it's almost like a fight in a pub car park where you go between a man and a woman, you go, you know what, I might just maybe this isn't my business, you know. I suppose, but I guess that was the first line where I actually thought, yeah, things are, you know, very different the closer that you get to them.
Have you, just going to that thing about your fellow comics who are invariably PC, right on, probably not that supportive of the troops and so on.
Well, a lot of, actually, to be fair, in fairness to them, quite a lot of the left-leaning ones did go out and perform for the troops, and you know, I suppose they're in their minds it was a different thing. They were looking at, you know, working class lads in a stressful situation and bringing so you know, there was, and obviously the talent pool available was so overwhelmingly left-wing.
Yes, quite. Whether they've gone otherwise.
Yeah.
But even so, have you ever confronted any of your comics, your fellow comics, on their politics?
No, we have chats.
Keep it quiet
and stuff. No, we have really detailed discussions. Sometimes they get angry with me. It's probably more likely to get angry with me on social media, as is everybody. You know, I think that hopefully when I discuss anything in person, people realise that my motives aren't malevolent. You know, I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in other people's views. I suppose the hardest thing to get past isn't how they feel about my politics, is whether or not they take me at face value. You know, and there has certainly been some that just thought it was kind of a rebranding move, and you know, that I just suddenly thought, oh, there's a gap in the market.
Oh, were you originally not out?
Well, I just wasn't a political comic, you
right.
know. And then what happened? And apologies if people heard this story before, but like, basically in 2013, I was very much a club comic at that time, and I just thought, is there something I could do that's a bit different? And then my wife pointed out to me, she said, well, being the Tory is fucking weird in this game. I was like, okay, yeah, that is weird. So at the Leicester Festival that year, I just did 10 minutes in a bigger show on that fact.
You sort of came out?
Yeah, came out, yeah. And then the head of Radio 4 2 months later said, oh, you know, where are all the right-wing comedians? And I was sort of like nudging my agent going, well, we might, you know. So I've shamelessly rinsed it since then. But the original idea was just trying to do something that hadn't been done before. But I think the coalition was a different era as well. No one was really that interested, to be honest. I was banging on about it, but it was. I think people were more focused on austerity as an idea and the Bullingdon Club and Cameron and Osborne than they were the Tory brand. I think the real difference, certainly for me, was that I noticed was post 2015, the kind of shock of the Tory majority and sole Tory power. Then it got a bit of purchase. Then obviously, you know, with Brexit again, things ramped up. But yeah, there's certainly some that I don't know if there's many that still think that, but yeah, I kind of, there's that sense of cynicism that it's only like I say, I perfectly admit that I've pushed it now. Of course I have. But the original starting point wasn't that I just thought, oh, I could fill that space.
But, I mean, have you always been a Conservative?
No. So in '97 I voted Labour. 2001 I voted Labour. 2005 voted Lib Dem. And then
that's like saying, you know, I've got to go to Afghanistan, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's a bit, or near enough.
Just this slow rightward sort of move. Yeah, it's very predictable as well, you know, given my age and stuff and my responsibilities in life. I mean, I'm very much like just the average bloke in the street. I did, you know, and then I just got to 2010 and I sort of felt, particularly from 2005 onwards, I saw a lot in what Labour had done and the legacy, and I felt that they didn't have an answer on certain things, you know, like long-term unemployed, long-term disabled out of the workplace. My mum and dad were disabled, you know, they just seemed to want to keep people in their places. And I started to get really increasingly frustrated with that. And I saw the rise in antisocial behaviour issues as partly to do with workless households. And all of that kind of got me to that point. And then, you know, and then I heard people on the left talking about benefit fraud as though it was a myth. And I was thinking, well, you know, it wasn't when I was involved, and you know, and people in my family. So in 2010, I mean, I didn't probably mention it to any other comics at that point, but I just saw, it was really weird actually. It was this moment when I was out and about, and I just happened to see Cameron. I saw his team about him, and you know that moment where you just think, I like the cut of his jib, you know. Again, it's that human reaction, isn't it? He just had a stride about him, and you looked at that against the fucking tired out Gordon Brown administration, and you know, I just couldn't see how Labour, I thought they were out of ideas.
Well, it must be hard now, or it ought to be hard, and I suspect it probably isn't, to be a lefty comic when the Labour Party is led by this rampant socialist, you know, I mean, who would turn Britain into Venezuela given half the chance.
Yeah.
with a party riddled with anti-Semitism. I mean, just really nasty, nasty anti-Semitism. And I don't really... I mean, you've got a few comics, David Baddiel, for example, who we're lucky that some of them are Jewish. So they're going to...
He's an amazing film at the moment. I mean, like, he's just one of the most worthwhile people on Twitter to listen to on any subject.
Well, have you noticed that some comics who would previously have been on the kind of standard lefty side are suddenly starting to wake up? Baddiel's one of them. Ricky Gervais.
I was still about to say the other day, is it like a libertarian left, I suppose, which we haven't had for a while? It's obviously, it was an easy fit, wasn't it, a libertarian right? But that's what... And Jonathan Pye as well, to a point.
He's been given... Look at the shit he's been given now by the left.
I know. I saw that clip the other day, and you know where he was talking about that people need to be honest about their racism, and I thought, look, I mean, I don't want to get into the beef because he was beefing with other comics and stuff, and I thought, oh God, comedy beef is the worst thing. Like in rap, they were fucking shooting each other. With us, it's just bitching on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I did think, I'm not sure what he said was even controversial. I think that's a long-standing idea that bad arguments die given sunlight. Or I've probably butchered the phrase.
No.
That's not a new idea, is it?
It's not.
That's all he was saying. But of course, because he's white and stuff, it's like, well, you know, you know that way that people characterise stuff on Twitter. So someone will talk for 4 minutes and then they'll just do inverted commas and say, this is what he's saying. So he's saying, well, you know, you should shut up, brown people. You know, no, I don't think he was saying that. But yeah, no, it's been interesting and it's been good, you know, with the Count Dankula thing as well, that you know, there's been lots on the left who are worried, I think, rightly so, about whether the left are any longer perceived as trustworthy guardians of free speech. You know?
Well, which they clearly ain't.
Well, yeah, they weren't. I mean, there wasn't much noise from it. I think the Count Dankula thing has kind of reinvigorated that. So there are people standing up. I don't know if you know about Andrew Doyle, who's one of the writers.
Andrew Doyle, I think he's
amazing. He's great stand-up
great.
as well.
Yeah. I must have him on the pod, actually.
Yeah, no, he'd be brilliant. And you know, there is that sort of stirring of like, you know, we have to speak out on these issues. And it's not to say that, you know, there's so much of it is like fashion. Like I don't care about being unfashionable, you know what I mean? I obviously I don't. So I admit that I read tabloid news, but I'm a tabloidy sort of bloke in some ways, and that I'm just aware of who I am. And I think that with politics, what's really odd, I think, being a political comedian is to take yourself seriously. I think that the starting point has to be that you see the ridiculousness of your own position, right? That all your contradictions, hypocrisies, delusions of grandeur, that you know them all first. This strident thing of, you know, that I'm a like a worthwhile soothsayer on the subject. I mean, I think I have the odd thing that's worth hearing, but I try and package it up like it's got to be funny and engaging first. Because if it's not either of those things, no one's going to fucking listen, you know?
I was thinking, it's not fair to get your bad mouth comics, but I was very, very disappointed by the decision made by Frankie Boyle to reinvent himself as Frankie Boyle was badass, wasn't he? I mean, he told sick jokes about disabled kids, which I think comics should be able to do, just because
if they're funny enough. I mean, it's always the old rule, isn't it? The darker you are, the funnier the jokes you need to be, and Frankie's quality is off the scale.
And then there came a point where they wouldn't have him on TV. He got sort of ostracised, so he kind of started going all PC, and I think comedy shouldn't do that.
I mean, I thought that his last series of Frankie Boyle's New World Order, I think the writing on that, like, and this is the thing, there is a lot of left-leaning humour out there. The writing on some of the monologues at the end, I thought was fantastic, you know. So, like, just taking it on its own merit. And that's the thing, is I am a fan. And part of the reason that perhaps I don't get involved in comedian beef is I probably see myself as a comedian first before anything else.
Yeah.
You know, so there's that solidarity of knowing how that, like with the Michelle Wolf thing as well. You know, the first feeling I see is I think she's actually done all right at a corporate there. You know, of course she split the room. She's fucking supposed to, you know. Some jokes landed, some jokes didn't. And with Frankie Boyle, what I suppose I appreciated was at least he's doing it, those are good jokes. Do you know what I mean? At least it's being done well.
You are quite a close-knit bunch, you comics. I've noticed it's a bit like doctors. You close ranks when you're criticised, and so it's very hard.
I can't afford to be either. Do you know what I mean? Well, it'd be very easy for them to completely ostracise me.
You've already put yourself out on a limb already.
Yeah, I'm a splinter cell. I'm behind enemy lines, right? You know, I'm trying to a double agent. You know, but that sounds sort of like negative or obsequious, but that's what interests me, is like winning people over. It's not, you know, there's the other brand of adversarial political humour where you play very well to your audience, but it's not really that I'm in it for. It's perhaps to get people that agree with me laughing, but also to get the other lot reluctantly going, maybe he's got a point.
Yeah, but you know, going back to this point, I've noticed when you introduce your politics, you introduce them quite gingerly. You know, there's an assumption when you come up with it that implicit that the audience is going to kind of be offended or disconcerted by what you're saying. But I mean,
they're mostly not.
They're not. They're not.
No, I know. It's a construct, isn't it? A couple of people have mentioned. I probably need to stop doing it because they're grown-ups. That's the brilliant thing I would say, is, James. Is when you, for all the shit that you hear online and stuff like that, you go around the country and whether it be comedy clubs. It's very it really reasserts your faith in humans, right? You go to comedy clubs, you go to tour shows. No one gives a fuck. Do you know what I mean? Hardly anyone gives a fuck about anything, or certainly not. Don't they're going to give a fuck, but they're not offended. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, like this idea that you voted in line with 43% of the people or 52. It's not a radical idea. It's radical in the context of an entertainment industry. It's not radical to people that have relatives and and will have voted for those things themselves.
Exactly. Yeah? I was having a comic at the other end of my tape recorder microphone is a bit like, when you meet somebody who's a doctor or an eye specialist or something, and you want to talk to them about your special problems. Yeah. And with comics, I'm just fascinated by the whole mechanism of being a stand-up comic. So I think a lot of us kind of quite envy you in some ways, and at the same time we think it's just going to be really horrible the nights when you die. And also the hours are so antisocial. I mean, how do you cope with a life where you are absolutely keyed up, and then it's 11 o'clock and you can't go to bed, can you?
Well, in a way, it's interesting you say that, because I've sort of been aware, certainly having now properly into my 40s, is that you start realising the toll that it takes, the adrenaline, the late night drives, and obviously having a 2-year-old son as well, is that I've just noticed that I'm not any good on Sunday mornings. It takes me a while, and then obviously if I've been busy all week, that's the time when my wife and kid need me to be on point. Like most, first time with Daddy, and Daddy's sitting there like he's hungover, even though he never had a drink. But it's just that adrenaline thing, and it's trying to manage it, and also as well, just. You talk about dying and stuff like that. I think once you've been doing it long enough, obviously death is always a possibility, right? Yeah. But it's managing your inner self, like when you're on stage of just keeping your shit, because you know the game well enough, you know the tricks, you know how to pull out of a tailspin, and it's like the wave is there, and you just got to stay on it,
Yes.
And then that's easier said than done. And weirdly, lately, I get more nervous with an easy crowd than anything else, because it gives me time to sort of disappear in self and go, oh, imagine if I just collapsed, or imagine if I pissed myself, or just like these catastrophizing thoughts.
Yes.
Whereas if they're tough, my brain will go into full super brain mode where, I'm sensing everything in the room and stuff. Like I mentioned to you just before we started about a gig on Saturday where I just felt off on stage. I felt anxious. I had a couple of palpitations, and I was like, this is ridiculous. You know what I mean? I've done way more high pressure gigs than this. And then I just decided to throw in something about my son, a completely new bit, because I thought I've got to do something to bring myself fully into this room. And it worked. And then it's so quick. Then the dream's alive again. It's really weird how quickly it can change.
And is it just spider sense, or are there certain signs you can tell me about? Because I do a bit of public speaking, and I sort of half have an idea how I'm going down, and when you're dying, but I'm never totally sure until
you
afterwards.
don't know. There are some you just simply don't know, and sometimes you have to go with what people are telling you. Like I recorded a Radio 4 special, which I should probably promote here, which I think is on May the 20th, and I was so nervous for that. I felt like, I don't know, I had all imposter syndrome going on, and we were doing sketches, and it was all like way out of my comfort zone. And I was so nervous during it that I honestly thought I'd bombed like badly. Right. Badly. I got so disoriented from going from stand-up to sketches and just keeping the order of it in my head. But after speaking to enough people, I just have to concede that we were not conceding. Sounds so fucking...
Yeah.
You
had to concede that you're basically
a
I am
amazing. Yeah. But it went really well. It did go really well. There was so much going on in my head at the time. And there is that other thing, and then there's more disconcerting than anything else. When you stride off like the cock of the walk thinking, fucking nailed that. You go into the green room and no comedian looks you in the eye because either it didn't go as well as you think you did, or you just did it in a style that was incredibly grating or something, you know?
Well, hang on a second. This is ridiculous. You've been doing this shit for however long? How
Yeah.
many years?
And you still don't know.
And you still don't know?
No. It's unknowable. You cannot... I mean, you look at I see sometimes really experienced comedians on like big shows, and I can see the fear in their eyes. Like they've got the fear. It comes again because it's being re-interviewed for your job every single time. You know, every single time you go on stage, it's a public interview for your job, and there's a degree of terror that goes with that. But I'm trying to accept that the adrenaline and the anxiety, they're kind of like they're part of it. They're my friend. You know, like they're like all the gigs I've done that have gone the very best have been like I've been wired. You know, going on.
Have you just changed something a moment? Have you seen the Nick Cave movie?
I have not. No.
Oh my god, you should. You're a performer. Are you a Nick Cave fan?
No.
Okay, well, I still think you should see the film because
Yeah.
it's just bloody amazing. It's a concert he does in somewhere like Copenhagen, I think, and his interaction with the crowd. He's a very intense performer, and he develops these intense personal relationships with individual members of the audience during the show. So he'll serenade a blonde girl, and she's just entranced. But there's a scene at the end where there's this fat kid that he has a kind of almost an aggressive relationship with, and then he has to bring the fat kid down and give him a hug and make him feel, because it approaches violence. But I was just wondering.
That is interesting. It sounds like what he's doing there is what compers do. I call it spinning plates. So you kind of get a few plates going, go back, give that one another spin and stuff, and it can be a thread that the audience quite enjoy.
Right, that's what I was leading to. Do you sort of focus on particular members of the crowd and think, this person's going to be trouble, this is going to be...
Yeah, or I just find something overtly comedic about somebody. I was doing a corporate the other night, and there was a guy sitting in front called Aaron. And, the status does come into it, certainly perceived status, and this probably isn't right, but, if it's a young, good-looking, white male, you think... nobody in the room's going to have any sympathy for him, right?
Yeah.
So it's so brutal the way that comedy is like that. I thought I'll have him. And the thing was, he wasn't wearing any socks as well. And I was just... it's just simple things like that. You're like, hey, that's a big shout, mate, isn't it? Not wearing any socks, and you get to probably have the reaction to another human being that we all have on an ongoing basis, but you get to it's almost like a sort of social Tourette's where you just blurt it out.
This is one of my previous podcast guests, a guy called Ben Irvine. He wrote a book called Scapegoated Capitalism, which is quite interesting, but particularly the aspect of scapegoats that it happens in wolf packs. They have this special wolf called the Omega wolf that the other wolves pick on just to sort of feel better about themselves. Feel better about themselves. So here you are, you're on stage.
Yeah.
You're having you're
And what's the status of that wolf? It's like he's not without merit, this wolf.
No,
but yeah.
They don't pick on the shittest wolf. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah,
they pick on a sort of middle-ranking wolf, because if they picked
wolf
on the
who wasn't wearing socks.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's what you're doing.
Yes, no, that's really interesting. I think I'm going to tell a lot of stand-ups about that, because I think that they would absolutely...
The Omega wolf.
Yeah.
Good. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Geoff Norcott.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
The real thing that the left is angry about is they're like, how could you allow these Russian memes? Somebody saw a meme and then they decided they had to vote for Trump. Or it must have been fake news. And by fake news, they mean conservative websites. Come on. But this is what the left thinks. Fake news. And by fake news, what they mean is shut down Breitbart.
Breitbart News Tonight. Weeknights starting at 9 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Geoff Norcott. Geoff, I've got some good news for you. You may not be aware of this. You know how the millennials are completely hopeless. I mean, we can never reach them because they are so set in their PC ways. They've grown their beards. They learn how to make kimchi and their craft beer.
They've got a Jedi versus Sith appreciation of politics as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they really are that basic, aren't they?
They. I mean, you know me. But I hear a lot in what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, but the new generation, we're talking about Generation Z, are so red-pilled that they look at the millennials and they think that they are very, very basic. So what I'm saying is that even though you think you're a middle-aged fart who's just completely out of touch with, you are actually bang on trend. You are the bleeding edge.
This is good news. I mean, I do sometimes think that when I look at my touring crowd, I think like that next touring crowd, they ain't going to come and see, you know. I do get some actually, to be fair, but I do wonder if I'm kind of like somewhere on a kind of like ongoing list of things that they feel that they need to do to kind of, you know, sort of be woke enough to get outside their echo chamber once. But that's really refreshing. What sort of age are we talking about?
We're talking about sort of 18 to, I think, probably ends at about 22. I think that's
interesting because I've seen a few of those at gigs recently and stuff, and they don't have like any clear, like you speak to them and you get no sense of their political orientation. Their compass is completely open in a way.
Yeah.
And there's no tribalism at all. They're not, and they're quite unshockable in a way. However, on that note, I did something for the MASH report where I went to, we were talking about like no platforming stuff and freedom of speech, and I was sort of saying, you know, these fucking students, they need to be sort of told what's what. So I went to like Royal Holloway, which is one of the most liberally artsy type places. And what was really interesting about them was that they were very offended on behalf of everyone else, right?
Were they?
As they should be. You know, like everything was awful and they would do. They really flinched when I said certain things, you know, just dealt in some fairly basic cliches about men and women, and they were, no, you can't say. And then,
by the way, I love your men and women stuff. You're very, very good part of your routine.
Well, no, I think what's really interesting, I've always loved talking about gender, right? And then it kind of became quite passé in comedy. They're saying, oh, the difference between men and women. And then because of Weinstein and stuff, this now is this hot button thing. So you can, you rather than me just talk about my wife, I'm talking about gender now. But really, I'm talking about my wife.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and these kids at university, and then when I was like insulting them like directly to their face, they were completely unshockable. And I said to me, isn't that weird that like you yourself have this resilience to insults and stuff and language but you don't suppose minorities have? Is it not patronising to think that they might not be exactly the same as you and have the same sort of inner strength? And that, you know, I found that a bit sort of offensive and patronising, a bit along the lines, I suppose, of what, I don't know if I'm using someone else's phrase here, but have you heard of like fainting couch feminism, you know? Like, well, you know, this sort of feminism that we encounter now where it sort of views women with perhaps less strength than or resilience. Or,
yes. Yeah,
and it's really weird for me at the moment because it might just be a consequence of the women that I've grown up around. Like my mum was like formidable, you know, my wife, all the women I've been around, I always associate them with taking no prisoners, taking no shit. And I guess I can't apply that to everybody. But that brand of feminism, sometimes I find it surprising because I don't see women like that.
Isn't it really a barn door size target? Because the relationships between human beings, and particularly between men and women, are utterly fascinating because we are so very obviously different. And there you are, going on the stage and saying all this stuff about the obvious noticeable differences, comedy of recognition, and somehow you're seeming to be daring and edgy.
It's another one of these things that just isn't radical at all. And I also think, like, I look around at the women in the audience when I'm talking about that, and you might think that the beret wearing, pashmina wearing types are going to be the ones that are staring me out, but they're not. They're laughing along, and I suppose that there's that irony, particularly I think when we all get to middle age, you look at those principles that you had, and you know they might have eventually thought gender's a construct and stuff. They might be with a really right on guy, right, who all along was like, babe, we're totally equal, and then the kid comes along, and it's almost inevitable that certain gender stereotypes will come back up as you realise some shit is just innate and you have to do your best around it.
Yeah, and also if you have male and female children, you see very distinctive traits emerging.
Well, it's weird with my son because I was a very sickly, kind of mummy's boy type child. I didn't have any. My son is all about fucking vehicles, building shit. He's just got that mind. I did not have that mind. So this isn't like something that's inherited.
Your dad was a bit worried about you for a time.
Yeah, of course they were. Yeah. No, just on. I was just a real apron string sort of lad. But like my son, he's about vehicles, airplanes, dinosaurs, cranes, all that shit. And again, you almost have to add this caveat. And plenty of young girls are into that too. I go, yeah, of course, that's obviously
some are,
the case. But just there's something there. I mean, soft play areas I think are fascinating. If you want to just look at what gender is, I've noticed that. I mean, if you really wanted to make an argument against the patriarchy, soft play area would be a good place to start because males are fucking horrific in that area on every level. So the boys are just awful. They're always trying to stop other people do stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if there's a boy at the top of the slide, the boy at the bottom will come in with this primitive, like, you've got the high ground, I have to stop you coming down. And we're talking about 2-year-old boys here.
Yeah.
Right? And just the moment that you'll see a boy noticing another boy have fun, he'll just fucking shoulder barge him.
Yeah.
And then you got the dads there that are just a complete liability because they're not paying any attention to their kids. I thought that's the most feminist I ever feel is when I'm in a soft play area.
Yeah. Just change the subject, because I've suddenly remembered something I wanted to ask you, which is, do you think, is a lot of comedy not about actually being funny, but persuading people that the spiel you're saying is funny? Do you see the difference I mean?
Yeah, I think if you set up a persona and a worldview, you can get people on a sort of like a tempo with you. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you're going, you're like, okay, I get where this guy's going. I think Mickey Flanagan's a brilliant example of that. Once he gets it going, you're totally on that thing of like, you're ready to laugh at. And McIntyre as well. Like, those are, you know, it's funny in comedy because it can be a bit snooty sometimes about people that are able to sort of play to mass audiences. But the ability to do that, like, and the comedy, the funny bones of like a Michael McIntyre is astonishing. It's like Lionel Messi. Do you know what I mean? It's that level of brilliance.
He is. You can't not admire him.
When he's on his game, man, like, I've never seen anything like it. When he's striding up and down the stage, and again, it's like that tempo. It's like you say, it's persuasiveness. It's like when he talks, there's something even in the tone of his voice, like he has total conviction in it, and you're going along with it, and it can come from a different place sometimes. It's really odd with comedy. You can go on there feeling totally nervous and uncertain, and the audience give you something, because I don't know if they tune in, like that frailty actually helps the comedy.
Right.
Do you know the weirdest thing, James? And I've never got my head around this. Is one of the worst moods to do comedy in is a good mood. If you have like a breezy, it's a nice day today, right? You had a nice little drive over.
Yeah.
And, and sometimes you get out of the car, I think that was pleasant. You walk on stage, you die on your ass. I've had it so many times.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The audience don't want you to be fully happy.
The reason I asked you that question was I was just thinking of 2 or 3 comics that I really, really hate politically. Mark Steele, Jeremy Hardy, and the one whose name's like Mark Steele but isn't Mark Steele. Another. Who's the one that goes around the country telling jokes about the town that they're in and on Radio 4?
I think Mark Steele does.
Oh, Mark Steele, okay. And even though I know that he would send me to the gulag and kill all my family at the blink of an eye, because that's his politics, I think his patter is really, it's amiable, and even if you don't like his same with Jeremy Hardy.
Yeah.
I mean, he talks absolute shit. He's not even funny, but he gets away with it because he's skilled.
I think like there's that thing of it's interesting for people that are right of centre like us, listening to people that have left of centre. It's almost like when it's done, you want it done really well, And I think that Jeremy Hardy, I used to be averse to him because I was thinking, he's left and I'm right. And I was listening to him recently. I thought it's really funny, and also it's that thing of inhabiting the character as well, like the unreconstructed Lefty.
But he believes it, though.
Yeah, he does. But I mean, I think I'd say that we all on stage, perhaps, like it's a slightly polarized version. I don't know him, to be honest, so I don't know. But yeah, I think that they've the other thing is they've both been doing it a really long time.
They have,
and that's what's weird about this comedy industry. Sometimes there's this obsession with youth. It's really weird. Like there's a whole generation of comics currently that are so talented. Like, if you go to clubs up and down the country, you'd see people fucking obliterate rooms. But
really,
these days, without a USP, and I'm not even talking about diversity targets, I'm just about one specific thing that marks you out. And obviously, I have them for that to an extent at the moment. There's any given week, the Comedy Store, the Glee Club, the Comedia, you'll go and see these people and you think, how the fuck are they not on TV or radio? But because TV, it does have an obsession with youth, and it's so strange that comedy's the longest apprenticeship you can do, and then quite often at the end of it,
nothing.
People don't exploit those talents.
So are you saying the market is super saturated at the moment?
Well, I don't think it's saturated with this weird thing about the club game. There's this weird sort of economics of it. Is if you talk about the amount of people that can really close a room, you know what I mean? Almost bulletproof. We'll storm it 90% of the time. The numbers of that are less than 50, I would say.
Really?
There's not
out
that
of
many.
How many?
Out of my working comics, I don't know the total figure, but I could. you know, if I was booking a comedy night, if I was to make a list of people, who do you think could? I'm not talking about MC it or open or middle, close it, because you need that last thing to be the strongest thing. And I don't know, there's not that many, but what's happened is there's this sense of supply and demand in the industry where people say, oh, there's loads of comics that are looking for work. And yeah, there are, but there aren't many of these comics, you know, and it's weird because it's very. The American system, which a lot of British comics would rail against, where it's kind of like your ability and experience has a premium on it in the club game. Weirdly, the club game is sort of oddly socialist in a way, that fees are broadly the same.
Are they?
For everyone.
I thought comics were just absolutely minted. I mean...
There was a period, you know, like before... The sort of noughties, you know, towards the mid-noughties, maybe the mid-90s to the mid-noughties, there were a lot of comics that did extremely well out of it, earned really good money, and that was just by doing club gigs and the odd corporate, you know.
Yeah.
It was, but the problem is the fees have stayed static. It got harder to sell tickets for a while, but what you have is this generation of comics that are still massively experienced and talented, but the fees haven't really gone anywhere.
Really?
And I think it's really strange that's not valued. You
Well,
know, you wouldn't get any other industry in the world where the more experience you get, the harder it gets to move on.
Maybe not, mate, but I must say, you talk about my industry. It's very, very similar. We're earning a quarter now in real terms of what we were in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So obviously professions, well, you can hardly call it profession, careers go in vogues, don't they?
Yes, and if they're cool and exciting, there'll always be more and more people that want to do them, and the more people that will come in and drop their drawers, they don't know. I mean, it's the same. Like when I started, I probably took fees that were, you know, if we'd have been unionised, I would have been, you know, hauled over the coals. But that's the nature of competition, I suppose. And in a way, you look at it, and I do look at it in a positive. I saw that kind of curve towards the end of the noughties. I thought, right, I don't see how the comedy game is. I can't see how club fees are going to go up. So I sort of, you know, diversify is a wanky word when you're talking about something that should be an art form. But I started writing for other people, and then I guess I thought, right, how can I do, like, you know, hour shows where I have something to say, and so I suppose in a way, and also the people that remain on the circuit. What happened was when the circuit contracted. I mean, the bills are so good now. You know, it's almost way better. Like, I did a gig in Oxford, right, on Saturday. It's me comparing a guy called Nick Doody opening, very good. Pat Cahill, very good. Rob Deere, everyone smashed it. And the punters were coming out there going, "How the fuck am I only paying £12 for this?"
Right.
And they're benefiting. You know, isn't it weird at the moment? It's the end consumer that's winning, isn't it? You know, whether it be free
with
content,
Spotify.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Do you find that? Are you still treated with a long spoon by the BBC? I mean, and TV generally. Do you?
No, I can't. I mean, if anything, it's the opposite. I think that the thing with the BBC and, you know, what the impact of Brexit is, I don't think it's any longer fair to say that they don't want to have writing invoices or anything, because I have so many meetings and that's not the case. But it's such a slow churn in a way. Like, I mean, you know, the BBC, I've been on the MASH Report, I've been on Question Time, I've been on quite a few things, I've got a Radio 4 special, so I can't claim to be an outsider, unfortunately.
Right.
It's a lot more sexy but I can't. And I've had meetings about other projects which, if they happen, would be awesome, you know. And I think that there is that desire, and a lot of there are some people that there's a difference between the BBC wanting something and then perhaps the producer of a show going along with that. That's slightly different, and, you know, it's a risk, isn't it?
Come on, they are all bloody pinkos at the BBC. So
yes, but equally they're business people, and what they've realised is that there's increasingly an audience that they just don't make sense to, and so ahead of their political views is their need to survive and get people watching their show. And, you know, the truth, you know, when I go on tour, there are people that come in to see my shows that a lot of the venues are saying to me, we haven't, you know, that they know the databases, and they're going, we haven't seen these people before. And it's not that they're all Brexit knuckle draggers, you know. There's some, you know, people that have bought their own cans of beer to the gig, but there's also people that have just thought comedy doesn't really speak to me anymore.
Well, it doesn't for a lot of us. We just sit there thinking, well, particularly Radio 4.
Yeah,
there's a whole coterie of Radio 4 comics that we just go. The News Quiz, for example. I mean, the News Quiz actually thinks that Hugo Rifkind, who is at best a centrist squish, they think he's a conservative. I mean, it's.
Well, do you know what I mean? Again, like there was a period like a year or two ago where they were sort of thinking, instead of having a right-wing comic on a show, they'll go, let's have a funny Tory on, right? Because then it's easy for them, isn't it? And there are plenty of them, you know. Jacob Rees-Mogg, hilarious, right? Boris Johnson, hilarious. Stanley Johnson's good value. At one point, I even saw the couple from fucking Gogglebox. And I thought, it's almost like they're doing anything other than actually taking this risk of somebody who's right of centre and funny. Like I say, I think it's changing now. And it's already changed. But sometimes it's a bit galling. But, the producers of something like the News Quiz, maybe, they see this show that's had a similar voice for so many years. It is a risk. And if you've got a younger, a commissioner perhaps who's a bit more experienced might say, I'll put Geoff Norcott on it. If you're the producer of that show and you're in your mid-30s, it might not be you're opposed to the idea that you're just a bit risk-averse, maybe.
Do you know my dream? And I wasn't going to say this on the podcast, but I am going to, because it is my dream, and actually one of my dreams, and I'm going to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to develop this show where people like us can just be normal and funny and talk about our political preoccupations without feeling like freaks, without feeling like we're the token, right-wing person surrounded by, donutted by a socialist, a Marxist, and a uber feminist, and which is what normally happens to us on TV. And I reckon if that happens, we'll be a lot funnier than we would be in the kind of the hostile, because you're sort of like getting your jokes under the wire in a context of.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. It's funny, but just like artistically at that point, I was realising then how much that kind of suits me, that narrative of being the outsider, the sort of naughty boy that they tolerate. I think that the evolution of a right voice in comedy will be programmes like that. And also, I think that maybe like the first guy to do it, on quite a few TV shows needed to be a guy that wasn't adversarial, like I'm not, or I mean, I can be a little bit of a prick sometimes, but and maybe the next person will be a bit more sharper.
You could no disrespect, but you could definitely be more out there than you are. I mean, you're as conservative as one can get away with pretty much these days.
Yeah, but I think it's also who I am, and I think in comedy it's sustainable. It's like I am scared of conflict. Do you know what I mean, and stuff like that. So the thing is, you could go beyond the pale, and you could be a shock comic for a while. But also, audiences they have this unbelievable knack of working out when you're putting on something. It's really weird. Like if you try and go, hey, and fuck this guy, and fuck, they'll go, that's not you.
Oh,
mate.
no.
Yeah.
I can see who you are.
So what I mean is, there'll be a person who really is that guy or woman that will come along, and it's interesting. Well, this might interest you as well. It's much harder, I think, from having discussions. They kind of accept that men are right of centre. If you're a female comic and you're right of centre, that's a whole new world of prejudice.
God, is there one?
Well, there are, but it's not for me to sort of say who they are. But I know for a fact that some of them are like, well, that's not part of the, the deal.
I would be very impressed if I could find that. Well, I can ask you for a secret list.
Well, it's not me. It's not for me to stonewall Peter Tatchell.
No, that I see. I do see your point. By the way, one thing I noticed about your set, and it's admirable in a way. There's a lot of kind of wasted material in there. You what I mean is you put funny stuff in there so lightly that it's just like take or leave it. You don't go big on it.
Yeah.
So you feel you're getting extra stuff. It's like sort of sub jokes.
I think that's because I was a writer and I'm still a writer for TV shows and stuff like that. So you just like, and this is I think like having been being a circuit comic by trade. Yeah. So you always, where's that next gag? Every 30 seconds, where's that next gag? Right. I'm not really in it to do this extended opinion piece that has this big wrap up at the end that's the first laugh. I'm like, I've got to earn the right to keep talking. It's like these tokens. You have to keep feeding the beast, right?
Yes.
And it's more old school in a way that I need these gags, because I don't think, I'm not really saying, you're not bringing any political views that are new to people, right? So what you are is you want to share your worldview, and you've got to earn the right to do that. And that's sometimes where I think that people that are cutting their teeth in political comedy everyone could up the gag rate a little bit. I mean, we mentioned like Frankie Boyle. I mean, whatever he's saying, however, the gag rate is high. You know what I mean? Yeah. Jeremy, it's not. Well, they call this thing that sometimes I suppose some left wing comics I suppose there's a cliche. Right-wing comics sometimes get shock instead of a laugh, right?
Right, yeah.
And the equivalent cliche on the left is a thing called clapter, where it's not laughter and it's not clapping. It's like you make a big sort of flag-waving point, and then everyone goes, I'll just clap that because you said something nice.
Clapter.
Yes, yeah. But that's true, isn't it? Like
True.
And the right-wing comics definitely is like, hey, I just slayed your sacred cow, and people going, yeah, not really, mate. We're all grown-ups.
Clapter. We're going to end there. That was very enjoyable. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast. One more thing.
Can I plug stuff?
Yeah, you can. Because you're I really recommend your show, and I'm not just saying that.
Thank you.
Tell us where you're going to be.
It's called Traditionalism. And so in terms of the calendar, we're doing a week at the Edinburgh Festival at the Gilded Balloon, and then the tour restarts. So we extended the tour on top of it already extending to October and November. We're coming to places like Newcastle, Sheffield, Bristol, a few out in the West Country, Maiden, not Aylesbury, all those places. I think there's about 20 dates. So if you just follow me on Twitter or on Facebook, I'll probably bombard you with this shit. Or just search Traditionalism online. And then, obviously the other thing is on May the 20th is the Radio 4 special. And if you are a bit right of centre, please listen and recommend it. Because this is, fair play to them. They've given me a chance, but it means nothing if no fucker listens.
Yes, and if you don't listen, Jeremy Corbyn will win. And it will be over for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be a run on the ports.
Good. Okay. That was Geoff Norcott. You're listening to James Delingpole on the Delingpole podcast. Thank you and goodbye.
By popular demand, Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson is now 2 hours.
2 hours, people!
Hear Sonny Johnson's cutting-edge conservative commentary every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East.
Every time I told you no, you turned around with a reason why there was something wrong with me. To all of you hypocrites and liars, I said, welcome to the universe of free thinkers.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson, Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.